Welcome to the Quo, a community of challengers, disruptors, and changemakers. I'm your host, Payal Patel. Join me as I dive into stories at the intersection of gender, race, and social and economic issues. This podcast series spotlights individuals from various industries, disciplines, and walks of life who are challenging the status quo. Through interesting and thought-provoking conversations, the Quo aims to elevate the voices and stories of endeavoring change agents in hopes of empowering communities and inspiring meaningful change within our society through education, advocacy, and the power of storytelling. Are you ready? Let's get it. Hey, cohort, welcome back to another episode of The Quo. This is episode 7, and today's guest is an exceptionally talented individual on many regards and on many counts. I've actually had the pleasure of joining her podcast with her dad twice now, and I'm going to talk about that with her too. But now it was time for her to join me here on The Quo. So that's what we're looking forward to, and I'm sure this will be a wonderful conversation. And today you're hearing from Faith Suggs, who is a former Division I basketball player from Duke University. No big deal. After college, she actually started coaching in Brooklyn, New York for 2 years. And then she started her own business, Brand by Faith. She works with clients to share their story and brand with the world in a constructive and beneficial way. Faith also serves on the executive board of the Polka Dot Mama Melanoma Foundation and Leeds Foundation. You can catch Faith every Friday on her podcast, The Huddle, on E60 TV at 10:04 a.m. Eastern Time. So clearly she's up to a lot and really excited to engage in a conversation with her. So join me in welcoming Faith.
Hi,
Hey,
how are you?
hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm great. I'm excited.
I know. I feel like I've been talking to you especially about this for a while now, and you were kind of part of the initial like scoop of when I was launching the whole phase of the Quo and what I was planning on doing with it. And I had the pleasure of joining you and your dad on your show. And just for viewers and listeners, for some context, the way I met Faith was through her dad when I was part of helping out the former players branch of the NFL Players Association and retired football players of Chicago. Schaefer Suggs is her dad. And so they actually started a podcast together. And it's called, remind me again, I always get the arrangement wrong. I know,
You're
Faith
fine.
Family Focus?
You focus. Yes, you're
Oh,
right.
good. I did remember. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So how's that going? Are you two still at it?
We are. It's great. We had an awesome show. We're in the middle of a series right now talking about mental strength. And so we talked about forming discipline, habits, and then, creating your support team. We have an exciting show coming up, I think, 2 Mondays from now, with a great psychologist and a great author talking about relationships and the psychology behind relationships. So, yeah, we're rolling. We're good. We're season 2, but it's been great so far.
Yeah, season 2. That's amazing. What have you collectively learned from your guests so far? I mean, has there been some sort of like a common theme? Has been there something that you just like it strikes you every time you talk to people in your space?
Yeah, I think the great thing about Faith Family Focus is we have a wide variety of guests that have joined us so far, from college athletes to regular students to pastors to authors to here and far between. And so it's been wonderful to hear their stories, to talk with us a little bit about the things that we prioritize within the show, which is family, relationships, facing adversity and loss. And it's just been really awesome so far. And, there has been a common theme, and it's, of course, let go, let God, and here. Yeah, I mean, each Monday, because we were doing Mondays and Wednesdays we rerun, we hit that theme right on the head, and our, guests never fall short of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And those topics you talk about, I mean, they obviously resonate with the both of you and your personal story. So, just for people who aren't familiar, want to kind of give some background. Well, one, I want to point out that I really admire your relationship with your dad. It actually kind of reminds me of mine, although my dad would never join me on a podcast, ever. Like, he would never do that. But he's been very supportive of the Quo, and he knows what I'm doing and what I'm up to. But I love that you two kind of came together on this, and it kind of like just speaks to your relationship overall over the years. I know that you've lost your mom, and then your dad kind of stepped in and has been the sole parent. What kind of values has he like instilled in you to for you to become the woman you are today? Because, you know, especially being raised by a man and you've got a brother, right? And so, but you've here you are, this like strong presence, which is exactly how he actually talked to me about you. He's like, you have to meet my daughter. She's just got this like strong energy, just like you, and you guys would really get along. And he wasn't wrong. So, kind of just want to hear like what that journey's been like, the values that you've gathered from your father, and how you've kind of how that's all shaped you into becoming who you are today.
Yeah, it's been wonderful so far. It's funny because people who know our relationship know that our relationship stemmed around, sports from the very beginning. Every Saturday morning, him and I would be in the gym practicing, and like we would drag my brother Devin along, who's 4.5 years younger than me. And he didn't get anywhere near the type of attention that I received as the first child, which was great. And also, we spoke on it. It was hard sometimes, but early on, I didn't really understand the values that instilled. I have an older father. He's 68. I probably took a year off his age, so he'll appreciate me. But, I get a lot of wisdom from him and a lot of, just information and stories from, who he was raised around, who he was raised by. My grandmother and my grandfather were very much hardworking blue collar people, in his story to making it to the NFL. And so there's a lot of things I've picked up here and there as a kid, but now that I'm an adult, and I'm, figuring out life on my own, right? Becoming an entrepreneur, coming out of college and to coach, all the things that went into it. I definitely have learned a lot of things from him through the show, which is patience, his ability to kind of figure it out as he goes. He's one of those people, like, he's like a cat. He always lands on his feet. And so he's really taught me, preparation, leadership, and just always going after things that, you may not know or think you have an opportunity to do something. But if you know him, everyone knows he's an optimist. He'll make you feel like you can do anything in the world. So it's been really special so far, just hearing him interact with other people's stories. And I've learned so much about him in his own experiences that I never knew. Up to 24 years of age. So, yeah, it's been wonderful in that way. And there's so many values and traits I'm learning from him that I'm learning to kind of instill in myself, but also learn how to take the stuff that he teaches me and flip it into things I would rather do it my way.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like what you said about like having that special connection from the very beginning of sports and that bonding your whole family, because I know you're like a big sports family. Um, for context, once again, Schaefer is a former NFL player, and then Faith has been playing basketball. Is that the only sport? Did you play others?
Yeah, basketball was it. I danced up to 14, and then we
Okay,
make a consecutive decision as a family. And so we
nice.
decided that, I kept growing. So we stuck with basketball for sure. And it worked out, gave me education. So it was wonderful.
Yeah. So when did you first start playing, and like what was that experience like? Just, as part of a sports family, getting into basketball and growing up with it.
It started, I think, when I was 5. We played at the rec league when I was younger, and I was in everything. They were very big on getting me in every sport there was, whether it was dance, soccer, basketball. I never got to do football. That was closed off for me. But we definitely dove into baseball, softball, all the things they could kind of get me involved in so I can kind of figure out what I like to do. There was never really any pressure. It's just, basketball. My dad knew more. That's his favorite sport, for those people who don't know. So it kind of just resonated with me early on. And yeah, I mean, I started pretty early, I would say, playing with the boys, but I probably didn't get good until probably about like middle school, high school. Which, if you ask him, he'll tell you that he didn't play me. My dad was my coach. He put me on the bench because I wasn't very good back then, but
He was your coach too?
he was my coach
Oh, that's
every
wild.
day. Yeah, and I didn't play. Benched me.
Wow. Well, that's how you know that he wasn't offering any special treatment, right? Like he was a fair coach then, for
Yes,
sure.
yes, for sure. I
But
think.
it all worked.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. Go on.
Well, it's funny we speak on it. My brother had a completely different dynamic growing up with him, obviously, and Devin's at Yale now playing football. Um,
Yeah.
so he was a lot harder on me than he was on Devin, much to Devin's disagreement. But it definitely was something that kind of taught me. I'm telling you this right now, like anybody can try to talk to me any type of way. I've heard it all because my father was one of the hardest coaches I've ever had. And it kind of really just made me extremely mentally strong towards really anything, which I am thankful for now that I'm older and removed from those years.
Hmm. Well, why do you think he was harder on you?
I mean, my dad's a big activator, and so he wants you to get it the way he would get it. And so when you can't get it, he's very detail oriented and has us like going over and over and over again, which worked. Obviously, we were pretty great athletes growing up, and but he was big on work ethic. And one of his favorite things is he's like, I can't want it for you. You have to be able to want it for yourself. And so. He lived that way. Everything he did was that way. Every way he, in his relationships, in his marriage, in his work, and his like, even to who he is now, he does everything the right way and he works hard at it and he grinds, and sometimes he grinds too hard. But I mean, it was implemented through his coaching as well, and so it was hard for sure early on, and our relationship was very like strained for a lot of it because it was like it's hard to find the balance between father daughter and coach and player,
Right.
there is no really healthy balance between it, and no books about it. So, but it did make us extremely close, and I understood who he was as a person probably earlier on in my life than most young women do when with their
Hmm. Yeah. Did he coach your brother too?
here and there. He did
Okay.
with football, and then he let go earlier. Around the same time he did with me, but Devin is the second child, so I don't know like what you rank within your siblings, but the second child is always a little softer, and he's the baby, and so he got the well improved shape for Suggs, who learned from his experience with me and applied it to him. Completely different, but wonderful it is.
Yeah, no, I have the same dynamic as you. I'm the older sibling and I'm the girl, and then my brother is the second sibling and the baby. And so yeah, it was like mistakes with me, learned, and then my parents, it was like more like, okay, now we can handle him with the right gloves, if you
Yeah.
will, or whatever. So yeah, I got some of that too. And same like as you, my dad was harder on me, and I think in a lot of ways for me it was also just to prepare me for what he believed I would face versus what my brother would face very much, right? Like I think, I got to give it to him. I think he anticipated a lot of the issues of being a woman in the spaces that I chose to be in. And, I navigated the sports industry as a person on the career side, not as an athlete. I played soccer, but not good enough to play like Division I soccer. I played club at Marquette when I was there, but that was about it. And my dad actually like was more of a coach for my brother, but he was harder on me in the sense that he's like, listen, I'm just gonna tell you right now, you don't have a career in it. Think about something else. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh no. But, in hindsight, like it worked out because I didn't want to, work towards something that it wasn't for me, right?
Right.
Like I enjoyed it as a hobby and all of that, but yeah, it seems like it's worked out for all of us, especially you, because you ended up at Duke, which is really cool. I mean, when people think of basketball powerhouses, they certainly think of Duke University. But what was it like being on a member of the women's team and often having to compete with the attention that often goes to the men's team? Because I imagine that even in that, despite the fact that it's a great program for both, men kind of like took the spotlight, right? So how did you manage that? And what do you say to people who are like, well, we just like don't want to like don't watch. No one watches women's basketball.
Yeah. 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 My freshman year was 2015, so the year after they won the national championship. So I ran right into, the hoopla of what men's basketball is at Duke University, and it humbles you very early, about how much money, about how much attention and resources are placed into men's sports. Luckily, I went to a school where they balance it really well. My coach, Coach P, Joanne P. McCauley, who's the author of Secret Warrior right now, she was very devoted on making sure we got equal everything, right? So we shared training rooms, we shared the hallways, our locker rooms the same size, we shared the same weight room, and we shared the same court. Everything that they touched, we touched. And so it really helped me learn a little bit about, going into it. It's easy to walk in with wide eyes, but I knew from the very beginning that we were capable of doing the same things. And so maybe the money isn't the same, of course, but we knew that we were important, and we had our own fan base, and our fans were our fans, and their fans were their fans. And so, and that's pretty big at most women's basketball and men's basketball places. You go to a Baylor, you go to an LSU, you go to a UCLA, it's about the same. The fans are women's basketball fans, the fans are men's basketball fans. And so I didn't really notice the distinction because we were told we were equal every day, right? And we shared everything they shared, and everything. We share the same chefs, everything, right? And so the competition was more on that we acknowledge the fact that we'll never be Duke men's basketball. Obviously, we don't have 5 or 6 banners in the gym, right? But we were important. We did have our own fan base, and we did have kids who would look up to us and come to games, and we had sold out arenas. We played on big stages. So it was a great experience at the end of the day, and it was more kind of like a compliment, men's to women, women to men. And I think I just was lucky to go to a school that made sure it was equal in a way and as equitable as it could be. And so that we didn't really think we were lesser than like the past.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear, especially given like recent headlines dealing with, NCAA, especially at the tournament level. And we talked about that a little bit on your show, but, obviously there was a huge distinction there. Sedona Prince actually shed light on it during last year's tournament, and how there was such a contrast between the resources that were available to men versus the resources that were available to women during the NCAA tournament.
Right.
And, that included everything from, like you talked about, you had equity in the training facilities, but there they did not. And food and even swag items, everything, the logos were even drastically different. They called it the men's tournament the Final Four, whereas the women's tournament, it was like women's basketball, Final Four. Like, why not just label it the same? And so do you feel like the NCAA still has long ways to go, and kind of what can they do to bring up that equitable piece across the entire conferences and the league in general?
Yeah, so it's funny because I played in the tournament twice in my 4-year career, which was actually disappointing. But I went into the Sweet 16, and I never once noticed that the women's basketball tournament is not branded as March Madness. When I was in it, I had no idea. When I was watching it as a kid, I had no idea. I just thought the thing was overall March Madness because, we called it March Madness, but apparently we weren't trademarked to call it March Madness as the women's basketball tournament. And that obviously happened this year where they all of a sudden said women can now be the March Madness as well. And I never knew that the men had all that stuff, right? I never knew that they were getting all this and that when we were in the tournament, because social media and TikTok really wasn't that, right? Just now, the last couple of years, Instagram story and TikTok and Reels have made video something where you can get access to their lives, see what the athletes are eating and getting and going and all the stuff that comes in with, media. We didn't have that. So we didn't know the boys were getting all that extra stuff. And so when you look back on that year with Sedona and she put it on TikTok and she blew up, it was not much of a shocker for those of us who were within it. We just thought that that's just how it was. And so, but we were glad that we got the support and the voices, because I think that's really what it was. There was no visibility to the difference. And because there now was, it pushed people over the edge. People all of a sudden were like, wait a second, especially women, right? They were like, wait a second, this doesn't seem right, regardless if I know basketball or not. That swag bag is nowhere near their swag bag. And so it was great in the sense that we had visibility to it and more people had visibility to it and not just us who experienced it. And I think that one thing about the NCAA is they're in hot water, and they still are. They're trying, but they're nowhere near where they need to get young women, the opportunity on TV and the way they give the young women, or even just now that NIL is a thing, maybe women will blow up as well. But I think we can take a page out of the WNBA's book from this year in the 25th season and how they promoted it and embraced it and connected with the NBA and try to get young women on TV. That's what needs to happen at the NCAA level in order for it to kind of become equal or equitable in a way, I should say. The monies will always be different, but you can't say no one's watching women's basketball because the numbers are proving that people are trying to watch women's basketball. It just has to be put in front of them, just like the visibility of what Sedona did.
Yeah, yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, here in Chicago, the Chicago Sky games in the playoffs were all like mostly sold out, but then the finals were definitely sold out and the house was packed. The energy out here, I mean, everyone rallied behind this team like big time. So, this whole talk about like, oh, no one's following, you can't use that anymore. That's not the case. The reason is, to your point, those games were made available on major networks,
Yeah.
so people had the opportunity to watch them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's an investment. If you want to invest in women's sports, the first thing you do is get it on TV. Like that to me is my biggest thing. If you want money to go to the league, which is what we want, and some people understand what needs to happen because we know that the rookie salary for a WNBA player maybe is 80 to 100 if they're lucky. The NBA rookie salary is significantly times 10 a trillion. And so that is because at the end of the day, the brands, the money, the investments into the NBA is significantly different to the WNBA. And I know that's because the WNBA has not been on TV and in front of people like it has been this year. And we're seeing the impact of putting them on TV and supporting them and just, the youth supporting them as well. The money will come. You just have to put them out there to be seen.
hmm It's still a challenge. This is what shocks me and so bizarre. There's still a challenge even when the money is there. Look at U.S. women's soccer, right? I mean, they raked in so much money through viewership of the World Cup. Those ladies have consistently been winning too for years and years. And then you've got Megan Rapinoe going, all the way into Congress and making a fight on behalf of all women in women's sports for equal pay for just like any other profession or industry, equal pay for equal work. And so I even then I step back and go, so what is the problem here? Even when you're bringing in money, how is it that you're not paying these women who are winning championships, by the way, compared to the men's soccer team that has not been? Like, how do they make more money versus these women who have obviously been proving results on the field?
Yep.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, you have to think about it. Men will always invest in bed and put money in men's sports. That'll never not be a thing, whether it's football to basketball to soccer. When it comes to women, one, there's a lack of effort to even do that, right? To see the value in it. That's another thing, right? Which is lack of education on that. But when you think about how much they invest in the men's side, there's no wonder they would stand up for men. No wonder they would stand up for this because you can't take away their precious men's sports. Now, when it comes to women, there always will be that moment of, yeah, but they're girls, right? But they don't play the same way, right? The ball is not the same size. And I've had many conversations on the lowering of the rim in the women's game. And that's what maybe will make it more interesting, right? If they start dunking, then we'll watch it. I'm like, really, right? You have to understand the women's game is different than the men's game, right? Women's soccer is different than men's soccer. It's just significantly different. It should be the ones to embrace it are going to be the ones that help with that fight for equal pay. Because they're still fighting that stigma behind, but they're women, so it's not as interesting or fun or, you know what I mean? All the things that go into that.
Yeah, and once again, I challenge that when you look at how fun the playoffs and the finals were in the WNBA, not just this year, but in years past too. But obviously, I had a special investment being a Chicagoan, and I know you're a fellow Chicagoan. I got really into it, and I was like, this is fun to watch. And so it's really like, just like you would with the men's team, get into whether it's your local team or whoever it is, whichever team you're supporting, and you get behind them, it'll be super fun to watch.
Yeah, why not? What do you have to lose?
Exactly. Speaking of which, how was it like for you as a Chicagoan and a fellow Hooper, for you to watch the Sky win the first ever WNBA championship?
Yeah, it was wonderful. One because Candace Parker and Quigley were the ones we looked up to as younger athletes in Chicago. And then a former teammate, well, two former teammates of mine, but one that I played with and went to the Sweet 16, Lexi Brown, was on that team as well. So that was one for us Duke women. We were like, so excited for Lexi because we don't know the last time. I mean, Duke women normally win in the WNBA finals, which I think people don't notice, but they're key in that, and they have very long careers. But Lexi's career has bounced around a lot in the WNBA. And so seeing her land on the team that was as exciting as they were, was being coached by a Black man, was being led in an amazing city as Chicago is, it was like so amazing to watch. And like I had tears in my eyes watching Candace, just because as Chicago people, we know Candace's journey. We looked up to her. She was our like Michael Jordan. So it was an emotional experience just to see the Chicago Sky get to that point and then at the end win it. Because I mean, the last time they were there was against the Mercury, but it was nowhere near. I remember growing up with Sylvia Fowles and them and that team, the Sky team, but it was nowhere near as fun as this year's team. And just, they weren't supposed to be there. And that was one of the best parts about it, is because they're not supposed to be there. I think that's as Chicago as it can be. Their story was implemented just like Chicago.
Yeah, the underdog story. And, especially because, yeah, to your point, people for some reason keep doubting Candace Parker, oh, it wasn't good enough that she did this and this and this. And then here she comes home to her hometown and like just right off the bat wins a championship for the team. So yeah,
Amazing.
no, that was really cool to see for sure. Do you foresee this as sort of like the catapult to WNBA now blowing up and getting bigger?
I hope so. I hope so because we sat in my house and we watched it, and my boyfriend he coaches and he played the game and he played at professional level. And so I never have ever had an issue with men who play basketball, watching basketball. That's never been an issue. It's the men who can't play a lick of sports, always.
Those are usually the ones, they're the trolls on Twitter commenting like,
They are.
Yep.
They are. We're used to it. We see it. But it's always funny that way. But I really genuinely think that the WNBA did an amazing job with this season. It's 25th season. That's another thing people forget about. This league's only 25 years old.
Right.
So it's still new. It's still growing. It still has its aches and pains. And I just think that it's hitting its moment now, right? I think we're at the perfect space in general in this country to be pushing change and pushing movement and pushing women in general. And so I think that the WNBA, I hope, has an amazing year 26. And I hope it is contagious to the NCAA level as well. But I think it'll be great. I think this finals was so much fun that, like, how can you not want to stay involved with women's sports in general after that?
For sure. I know that there are several people that I like in my network alone who are now considering season tickets to the Chicago Sky games. I know. I'm like, that's really exciting to hear and see. So I really hope it continues too.
Right.
For you personally, how has playing sports, being around sports kind of shaped you and your professional career? Because you're obviously now you've launched your own business, you're an entrepreneur. And so how has that translated over?
Being an athlete is the wonderful pieces, and then you have the hard pieces. I think one of the biggest about being an former athlete is that we know we can do anything. I think that you learn discipline, you learn teamwork, you learn leadership, all the things that comes with team sports. You pick it up, but you also learn, perseverance and facing adversity and injuries, and all that applies within the workspace once you become an adult as well. But I think one of the significant pieces I took away from being a former athlete and now trying to own a business and start out in the world, and even when I was coaching the last 2 years, is I learned how women are perceived in the workplace and how the respect you have to earn from men and from even some women in workspaces is a significant thing you learn. And as women athletes, we're surrounded by powerful women all the time. So we never are experiencing doubt. We never experience pushback. So when I was placed in a space working and now starting a business and having to prove myself and explain myself, that's one of the biggest things I've learned and I've appreciated, because it gave me that backbone to stand up for myself and to sell myself to businesses and clients, like that I will get it done. Trust me, I can. And that's the thing women have to do endlessly, is to prove themselves. So there's wonderful that. And then, as being an athlete, you're also so critically hard. on everything you do. So that's something I'm learning is as strong as you can be, you're also learning like I'm not supposed to be perfect and overachieving. And I actually had an amazing show on Friday on the Huddle, which is my personal show with Kirby Porter, and she played basketball at Harvard, and she was 30 under 30 like top sports business journal, like amazing girl, works with Pepsi and now is with Will Ventures. And she was like, I, as a former athlete, I'm so thankful because I learned how to get stuff done. But I also am trying to figure out like why when I sit on the couch do I feel like I'm failing or being lazy because I'm not doing something, or like I'm not like I don't feel like doing work, following up with that email. Why do I feel like I'm failing? So it was very interesting conversation because I was like, as an athlete, you're taught to push, push, push and be great and believe in yourself, but you're also like, shouldn't you be doing something else? Shouldn't you be doing more? And you're always an overachiever. So it's been an interesting journey is learning the balance between the two. And now I'm like learning to like make yourself like, you're a normal human. You can be like chill for a second. But yeah, it's been interesting, but it is definitely a benefit to be a former athlete because, adversity has nothing on you.
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine that there are a lot of things on the court, the field, whatever, that you take and you translate over, like just based on the fact that you're competing every day, like day in, day out. It's a competition, and that's surely the case, like you said, especially as a woman of color, like having to go out there. A quote that always comes to my mind is from one of my favorite shows. Have you ever seen Scandal on ABC with
Yes,
Kerry Washington?
of
Okay,
course.
there was an okay. Many people have, but then there are sometimes I'm in rooms where they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you got to watch this. Um, but there's that one episode, and I always come back to it, where her dad, Papa Pope is basically like coming down on her like hard, like this is I think this is in response to her obviously relationship with the president, but he reminded her that you have to work twice as hard for a half of what they get. And so, that's something that just like it strikes me all the time. I always have to like remember that. And even in the work I'm doing right now, I haven't shared this on the show yet, but I recently joined a political campaign and I'm helping lead communications for a woman of color who's running for office. And it's against someone who's very resourceful. Of course, he's a white man with a lot of power, a lot of privilege, and a lot of money. And she has to work twice as hard to get the half the attention he's going to get, right? Because he's naturally going to get more with that money. He's going to have an easier path, and she's got a bit of a path of resistance, and that's been the case for me as well. I've just often hit those types of hurdles. So for you, and you're talking about your business and you're talking about having to prove yourself, and you also said that there's doubt in people. That's just like it's the first thing, right? You have to prove someone because they inherently come into a room with you with doubt. How do you overcome that? How do you get past that and try to prove your worth in as minimal time as possible? Because I don't want to be having to spend so much time having to prove myself. Then I'm losing so much ground. So what do you do?
Yeah. I think one of the things I had to learn a long time ago, and I tell all my girlfriends this, and they always laugh at me because I have such a bold sense about me when I walk in rooms, is I always explain to them, like, if someone is intimidated by you, that is not your fault that they're intimidated by someone else, right? Like, you are not intimidating, they are intimidated. And that's something I had to learn is that I can't change the way someone thinks about me. I can't make someone more comfortable with me. And that's something actually me and my dad have a lot of conversations with because him as a black man in his generation has learned how to conform to not aggressive and not scary and not overbearing, right? Because those are all the stereotypes that come from black men. And he has a different view on it. And I have the view is like, screw it. Like, I'm just gonna be me. And if they are uncomfortable, I promise you I'm as good as what I can do, and they eventually will fall off. And him and I go back and forth on that all the time because he's like, that's not how it works. And I'm like, well, it works with me. Because yeah, as women, like one of the biggest things I learned is that finding allies within your workspaces is one of the biggest things you can do, because you have to understand you are coming in as the underdog. You are coming in with all these perceived notives about you, whether it's you're aggressive or you're a pushover or it's this or you're that. And so you have to kind of just be your truest self, because I mean you can't shake truth. I think that's one of the biggest things is you can't rattle when something's real. And that's what I've started to learn more and more is like if I keep being my authentic self and I keep trying to show people how authentic I am, then more and more I'll see through the doubt instead of facing it, you know?
Yeah. No, I hear you. That's what I feel like all I can do when I sit at a table. Like, look, this is me. This is what comes with me, and take it or leave it type of thing. Of
Yeah.
course, there's also people who are still also going to doubt you. And what the biggest thing that I've learned in my career is to try to eliminate the self-doubt. Because
Yeah.
if there are doubters externally, like to your point, nothing I can do about that other than show up and show
Yeah.
up all the time and put my best foot out there, show that I'm competent and I can do the job and I could do it well. But that self-doubt, which often manifests because of the external doubt, is something like I got to work on day in, day out.
Yeah. It's that feeling of like that sometimes that imposter syndrome, like you don't belong. And I think that women face that more than anybody, because
Mhm.
we have to prove people because immediately they do doubt us, or they
Yep.
talk softly, or all the things that come with being a woman in a professional space. And so, it's hard not to feel like, do I even belong here? Am I doing a good job? Am I good at what I'm doing? Because like you are your biggest critic. And I think that that's something that I had to really figure out is like, you know what? So what everyone else thinks, I'll just battle myself. And so that's where I am now is I'm battling, like trying to convince myself that I'm great at what I do. And because of that battle's so loud, I haven't even thought about others. And so now my goal is to win that battle with myself and like continue to strengthen myself. And then I'll face it. But it definitely is self-doubt is one of the loudest things we can do. It's hard.
It really is. I mean, and like you said, especially when you're in spaces where you feel like you don't belong, that imposter syndrome, kicks in. And that was especially true in working in sports. Like, I can't tell you how many times the microaggressions of like, I'll start talking in a space and they're like, "Oh, you actually know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
Like as if that's supposed to be a compliment to me. Like, cool, so you doubted me this whole time? Like, or, like the my favorite is when they try to quiz you. Like the trivia is like, "Wait, you're into that sport or you're into that team? Name 5 players on that team." Like, why? Would you say this to a guy? Like, would you try to question whether or not he knows who's on this team? And like, when they'll go into like, well, in 1995, what was the shooting percentage? Like, do you know that?
Know
Like,
the answer to that question. Do you even know? Yeah, and that's my biggest thing. And I will never really know statistics. That'll never be my thing. But I played the game, so I. But most players don't know statistics. They don't know Michael Jordan's free throw percentage in 1997. They don't. But they know Michael Jordan won the the NBA championship in 1997. I know that. So me and you are about equal as it could be, except for the
right.
fact that I'm a woman, so I'm already overstepping you in that. And so it is very interesting because you do have to constantly prove yourself to.
Once again, twice as hard for half of like, half the respect. Like I have to know the stats in order for you to feel like I actually know what I'm talking about and I deserve to be in this space with you and have this conversation with you. Like, oh, okay, now you know what you're talking about because you know the statistics. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with my basketball IQ, my sports IQ in general. Like I know the game. If you talk to me like you're talking to any other person, you'll know that I can hang. But man, working in sports was such a challenge in that area, like
Yeah,
constantly having to prove that I
yeah.
know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
Like,
know a lot of women who work in sports and sports reporting, and they're like, man, I know women who will run circles around guys with content and just talking football, basketball, soccer. Like they'll know, they know their history, their stats, they know what it is, their predictions, all spot on. But because they're a woman, the truth and the stats and all that gets missed, and it's more kind of like, wow, either it's do you really know or wow, good for you. And So then that woman's initial bam and wow is just diminished because of, the stereotypes and the stigma around women in sports.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I frankly exited the sports world. Like, it's not because I lost my love and passion for the actual content and the subject matter, but I got tired. It's exhausting to have to go in every day and defend myself and prove why I'm worthy of being here, you know? And as much as I wanted to be the one that helped change things inside out, to your point when you said like looking for allies in the workplace, I didn't have that 10 years ago. It's been a while since I've been in sports, right? So I know it's changing, it's slowly, but there weren't women in leadership roles. So I had no one to turn to. There was no one that could be like, all right, let's change the culture here. Like this culture isn't conducive to creating representation here, to diversifying and all of that. But I really hope it does. And I hope that, girls who are considering careers in the future in sports will have that to lean on.
Yeah, and it will. That's the steps, is putting women in positions to make decisions, and those decisions is bringing more women along, and that's just what's going to have to happen. Um, and that's, an ally is an ally, but it's really about always going behind and bringing others with you. And until we get more women in positions on ESPN, until we get more Maria Taylors, until we get this, and that,
Hmm.
we're going to be stagnant. So I think that it really is putting young women and even people of color in general in positions of power where they can bring others with them and diversify and include, and all the things that come down to creating a better space.
For sure, for sure. And, I feel like you are part of that work with even just the content you're putting out there. I want to hear about the Huddle, how that's going, and what kind of guests you've been bringing on.
Yeah, so the huddle so far has had all Black guests. I tried to be particular about that because normally Black guests are the few and far between, um, and they're trickled in. And I thought, you know what, let me hit it with a bang immediately. I have some awesome Black voices that I know, and young voices, and then I'll bring everybody in and add more inclusive, be more inclusive. But from the very beginning, I had an awesome guest with Ashley Nicole Moss, and she's a digital reporter with Sports Illustrated. She's from Queens, but she is also from Brooklyn. And so she has a great spicy personality. Then I went to Nolan Smith, an assistant basketball coach for Duke. And then I had Kirby Porter, of course, who graduated from Harvard basketball, and she's working with Blue Ventures. I had Shane Southwell, he's assistant coach at Kansas State. He's also young. He's the youngest coach in the Big 12. And he's Black. And so I had an amazing group of guests. My dad joined me one day, and we talked through women's sports, same conversation we're having today, and just hearing his perspective on it all. So I'm really excited kind of the direction that the Huddle is going in. I really wanted to dedicate it to just sharing stories. While Faith Family Focus, we talk through life, we talk through many dynamics that go into our story, and we have our great guests that kind of can co-sign on that through their own stories. But with the Huddle, I wanted to centralize it on talking about other people's stories, and their stories can be the life lessons that we take away from it, because each person has an experience they go through, right? I spoke with Nolan Smith. He's the assistant coach at Duke. He lost his father around the same age I lost my mom, right? And his older sister, Sydney. They're a wonderful family. So we got to talk through bereavement, and we talked through, the expectations that come from a kid growing up without a parent. And so then I asked to talk with Ashley, and Ashley talked the same conversation we had about how when she was at Sports Illustrated, she had to run in circles to get Sports Illustrated to respect her work because she was doing it for free. And so, we've had so many great guests, and now I'm going to have Anne-Marie Nitty, who was a former model. Now she's a stepmom. Her dad was my dad's best friend. So Annie also battles Lyme disease, and so it's going to be an amazing story with her in general, because she's a former model and now she's a mom who's navigating that space and navigating being beautiful and also a boss and all the things that comes with that. And so the Huddle's going the direction I wanted it to go. And each week, I think I surprise myself with the guests and what they show me, the stories they tell us. And there's always that one moment that it blows up. I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. And so I am excited for it. It is still Fridays at 9:04 a.m. Central, 10:04 a.m. Eastern. on E360 TV, which is a great platform that's been supporting us from the very beginning. So it's been going well, and I am excited for kind of the direction it's going.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that take off as well. And there's like so much synergy with the quote. I told you that from the moment that you shared that with me. Like same thing with me. If you look at my guests, like so far it's been all women. That wasn't like supposed to, that's not what the quote is going to be like in the long run, but I know that there's been a space that's been missing where, there just hasn't been enough elevated voices, but especially women of color. So of my 8 episodes, 7 have been women of color so far. Of course, I will be expanding beyond because I think everyone needs to be a part of these conversations, right? That's the only way change is going to happen is even if communities that are traditionally privileged join the conversation and can be part of it and be allies is how we move forward. But it's really great to see that like even through your platform with the Huddle that there's now an opportunity, a space for people of color, Black men and women especially, to have their voices elevated. And I just hats off to you for that, and congrats on launching that.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's been wonderful so far, and I each story has been amazing, and they just happen to also be a Black person, and so that to me was just like I was like, these are the stories I'm chasing, right? The forms of ways to fight through adversity, having to prove yourself in the world. That is the very outline of what this country is about, and each guest I'm hoping aligns with each and every person who's watching. And so, yeah, I thank you. It is going well that way, and it's unfolding without my help, I should say. I'm just there, kind of carrying it along.
Yep. Yep. I definitely understand the feeling there. Before we go, I do want to also talk about we talked about the business that you've launched, Brand by Faith. Tell us a little bit about what that's all about, and for those who are out there struggling with like advancing their personal brands, any tips you can offer?
Yeah, so I started Brand by Faith. I had been wanting to start it actually. So when I was coaching, one thing I knew I wanted to do was work in social media and work in branding and marketing. And coaching was paying the bills, was paying my rent, and I was able to build the brand at Long Island University women's basketball. I built it. I think in 1 year we grew 200%. And I was okay. I actually like doing this. You know what I mean? I like staring at phones. That's what I was. First of all, was born to do. My generation thrives within digital media, and so why not capitalize off of it? And as a former athlete, that's something I really learned how to do. Is your brand is your money. It's your resume nowadays, especially your social media presence. So in May, I moved from New York and I started my business Brand by Faith. Which is dedicated to sharing the social media and brand development of our clients and sharing their digital story, because that's what sells now. And I think that what we're starting to see is people are starting to prioritize that in higher positions like mine. And there's like 6 of me on each NFL team, and there's like 10 of me on each NBA team, and there's at least 3 on each political campaign, right? The social media and brand development is key for the future, for selling things, for getting people on board. So it's been wonderful so far. We've got 5+ clients working from website design to just brand development to, it really depends on I have some who are college coaches and they want to talk about their blogs. And I'm like, all right, let's do a blog. Some people want to do a podcast. All right, let's do a podcast. Like all the things you need me to help you with, let's do it. But I'm here to be your creative mind around it all and help you kind of capitalize off of, this newfound, society, which is, the new money. It's the money. You chase the money, you got to be part of social media and brand development. And so it's been great so far. Being an entrepreneur has been interesting because you have to be your own accountability partner. And often you're like, am I even doing a good job? But what's wonderful is that you are your boss. So you're the one that tells you that you are doing a good job and you pay yourself. That's always been the best part so far. Instead of having to
Yeah,
work.
I'm just like, I'm dipping my toe in it right now. I'm like, all right, let's see. Now that I'm doing this campaign and I have this opportunity, this window to like I'm all about taking risks in this next chapter of my life. And I'm like, all right, if there's ever a good opportunity to do this, it's now. And it is risky, which is an
Yeah.
unsettling feeling. I'm naturally risk averse. My brother is the opposite. This might be another like
Yeah.
men and women type of thing. But yeah, I kind of just I'm trying to like because I couldn't find that the wealth and the opportunities in, the corporate structure, I'm like, let me just see if I can make it on my own.
Yeah.
But what kind of went into for you? Like, what was it like, all right, I'm doing this. Like, you know, forget any sort of like doubts related to risks or whatever. I'm making this leap.
Well, one, I knew I wanted to get out of coaching, because my position on staff as director of basketball operations is literally the skeleton of each program. And so you take care of everything, everyone, every meal, every trip, and so I was exhausted, especially going through that first year of COVID coaching. And I was like, I'm no longer having time to do what I want to do. And it's draining me. And so I was like, oh, screw it, I'll do it. And so I decided to move. One, I wanted to move with my boyfriend. Actually, that was a big leap for me to take, as a young woman, especially as an independent woman, learning to kind of make that decision as well. But it was kind of the shift of what society was doing. Like I saw so many former classmates at Duke quit their jobs, right? Quit their jobs on Wall Street, like some were going to medical school. They're like, no, we're not going to medical school. I'm starting a photography business, right? It's the little things that I saw. And I was like, there's a shift coming. Like there's something happening around us that everybody wants to kind of take life into their own hands. And I was like, I have to be a part of that. So I was like, let me go be around people I love. Let me start a business where if I fail, it's on me, but at least I'm teaching myself and I'm educating myself and I'm advocating for myself on a daily. And that was kind of everything that went into it. I just wanted to make sure that I was living my life and my career the way that I wanted to live it. Because as an athlete, you live it for what, each step is, what you're supposed to do. And so when I was like, I'm free from that life, let me try something new and create that identity, off of, the very disciplines that I learned as an athlete. But let me try to take life because life is too short. And I think we all learned that, it being in this pandemic at all, is that after that first year, people were like, why am I still doing this? Why not? Why I should do something that I love to do. And that was kind of the biggest motivating piece for me. I was like, I want to wake up and be happy that I'm about to
Hmm.
do something, regardless if it's a lot of work or not. At least it makes sense to me.
I know it's a real thing. There's like tons of articles out on this subject matter of like the Great Resignation is what the movement's been called, right? Like the
Mhm.
pandemic has really like forced us to reprioritize and understand what's most important to us. And a lot of people have just been like, I'm quitting. Like, I'm not gonna just be here sacrificing all these things. I've now like identified my core values and I'm going to take this and run with it. And so it is really interesting to see and an interesting time overall to be, out
Yeah.
here in the market as entrepreneurs. But I commend you on it. Just back to like the any sort of tips you can offer for someone that's like trying to get their brand out there, especially to cut through the noise, right? There's so much content out there. What are some things that you found really to be effective?
Yeah, being authentic. I think, I always ask my clients to write down the three themes of their life that they think are important, whether it's family, to coaching, to motherhood, to whatever it is. Prioritize those things, and that should be your daily voice on social media. That should be implemented through your posts, through your stories, through your lives, through, maybe any captions you have, the way you interact with other people, because that's helping you sell you in an authentic way. And I think we all have impressive sides to us. We just have to have people advocate for us. And so why not advocate for yourself? And I think that's one of the biggest things is navigating what's important, what your themes are, and then navigating what your mission statement is out of this. What do you want to happen? What do you want growth to happen? Who do you want to connect with? Right. And I think, when you can navigate and put that all together, you start to see a real benefit off of, your brand and your social media and just the investment into digital footprints.
I'm so glad you said that because I have a client right now who's like, I feel really braggy when I try to like put myself out there, and I'm like, no, 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 you're telling your story and it needs to be shared if you want to, like you said, right now the digital space is it's the future and it's going to continue to just take off. And so you don't want to miss that train for sure.
You don't,
Yeah.
especially when you know how to do it. Because we're all going to be here 50 years, 60 years from now. And now there's something else we have no idea how to use. So why not capitalize off of what we know how to use now, right? Before we are 80 and we have no idea what the kids are using now. And you're completely tapped out about how to make money. That's my
Yeah.
biggest thing. Why not capitalize on the resources you have in front of you when you have them?
Absolutely. I mean, like, I barely understand TikTok, so it's already starting to happen. I'm like, oh no. Like,
I don't get it.
I yeah, yeah. I'm like, all right, it's already enough for me to have to balance Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I'm gonna try to stay out of TikTok for as long as possible, but who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen there? Can you tell folks where to find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media at FaithSuggs underscore on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And then also my website, www.faithsuggs.com, has my story, the awesome story that Holly Rowe did on ESPN on me and my family, and then also Brand by Faith information, how to get connected, how to get to, get to work together.
Love it. Well, Faith, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to chat with me and, impart some of your wisdom out into the Quo community. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. This is a wonderful platform. I'm excited to see how it goes.
Thank you. And to those listening, hope you'll continue to tune in. Excited for the next batch of guests. You can find us on social media at the Quo Media. And until next time, take care. Hey, it's me again. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, and I really hope you did, please subscribe to the show on your favorite streaming service so that you're notified when new episodes are posted. Also, be sure to follow The Quo on social media at The Quo Media across all platforms for the latest and greatest. Thanks again for joining, supporting, and uplifting the Quo community, or as I like to call it, our Quohort. Catch you next time.